You want to learn, but you can't stay consistent. You start off strong, you're focused, you're progressing, but then it drops off and you forget what you learned, you lose that momentum, and you end up back at square one. And you might think, could it be a motivation problem? It might be ADHD, it might be procrastination, but either way, nothing is sticking long term. I'm a learning coach. I've trained thousands of students and professionals on how to learn. And in this one on one consultation with Maleken, a professional stuck exactly in this loop, we break down why this happens and how you can fix it. Full session, nothing
But
cut.
I'll leave that to you to decide where we start.
Okay, easy. Oh, that's actually scary. But I think it's more of how can I optimize my time? Like when I learn, how can I make sure that I use it efficiently and learn the things I need to learn because I don't have time for fluff right now,
Mm,
and then also retain the information because I'm very good at learning the overlaying things of a concept, like the under like I'm very good at pattern recognition. So I understand the patterns that dictate like what, for example, machine learning, you just get a model, like basics, and I break it down to very simple things, black and white. But then because I'm in a rush or I just don't have the attention, I never actually build up the expertise. So I might be able to do it, but I can't explain that to someone else, and that
mm,
hurts me during university. So I want to be able to build that ability to understand it, articulate it accurately, and also not spend like 12 hours, of which I could have spent 4 hours.
mm. No, that's very good. That's actually very useful to know. So what you just done there, you kind of identified some problems that you already have, some of the goals that you have, like 12 hours to 4 hours, trying to understand things and an inability to understand things kind of impeding university. What I want to get more of an understanding of is like where you are right now. So
Okay.
tell me a little bit more about these two things. Number one, like what does your current learning process look like at the moment? And what are you studying at the moment? What are you deciding to work towards? And then second, like what are the biggest challenges, or if you have to just identify what's the number one challenge, if we solved it together, it's like, yeah, like would be able to make some meaningful progress.
Okay. Well, I think the biggest fault is consistency. That's the biggest thing is I just have big spurts. My learning process right now, so for all my subjects, is I'll skim through the lecture notes. If I have a good teacher, I'll go to the teacher and I'll argue with them about the topics. If not, I'll argue with ChatGPT, just to like poke the holes through it. And if
Mm,
I can't, then I'm able to like take it on. Then after that, when the assignment comes out, I'll straight away go to the assignment. If ChatGPT can do it, I'll just get ChatGPT to do it, and I'll work backwards. So I'll just use ChatGPT, the assignment, and the lecture notes to then, okay, this is how this looks applied. So then I can understand the topics. And then if ChatGPT doesn't work for it, I'll get ChatGPT to like spew out a bunch of questions, and then I'll just solve it. The only problem is now I know how to do the thing. I don't know how to articulate the thing. And it works for maybe 1 month, 2 months. I'm very solid at that thing. But then after 2 months, I couldn't tell you anything about it.
I see, I see. So again, like a few more issues that were kind of rising up. So just like the inability to teach something, even though you're able to kind of do it, but articulating it is quite difficult. The long-term retention of something. So 2 months afterwards, we're kind of forgetting it when we need to use the information again. But something that you mentioned was consistency being the biggest problem. Tell me more about what that looks like.
Okay, so I'll when it's really hard and I don't understand anything, it's very interesting. So I'll be able to spend hours on end doing it, depending on my time. And even when I'll be able to make time because I genuinely enjoy doing it. So instead of hanging out with friends, I'll just do like algorithms, for example. Once I start to get like good marks and I start to understand the concepts, um, I kind of like I get I don't know if the word is getting bored, but it's no longer as interesting.
Mm.
And so after that point, I stop, or I get cocky. Realistically, it's an arrogance issue. I think I've already got a hang of it. I start to pay less attention to it, and then slowly it creeps up on me. That like, okay, I should have been paying attention, because when it's easy, I don't want to pay attention. When it's hard, I want to pay attention. But then
Mm.
as soon as it starts to get easy again, because I made it hard, I stop paying attention again. It's like an ADHD thing.
I see what you mean. So it's like inconsistency, but the root of it is like, cool, if this thing is really hard, I'm going to be really interested in it. But then because I'm interested, I'm spending time on this hard thing, eventually it gets easier because, again, I'm just like developing that expertise and that familiarity. But then the problem is now that it's easy, I don't want to touch it anymore because it's easy. And now I want to
Yes.
spend time on the hard stuff. But the problem is like when you stop spending time on it, you eventually forget it. Is that like the root of what the problems are at the moment?
Yes. Yes.
Mm. I want to know more why it's a problem. So is the reason it's a problem is because like, let's say for example, we've got like an assessment coming up and the assessment requires us to have like a holistic understanding of the curriculum. But what's happening is maybe there's like parts of the curriculum that was once hard, but now it's easy. You don't touch it for like a couple of months, but now you've got this assessment coming up and now it's like, oh damn, like I don't know anything about it because I haven't touched it in a while. Is that like the root at the moment? Is that the root problem?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to university, yes.
Hmm. Okay. So when it comes to university, yes, that makes me question, does it come to something else? Are you trying to apply this in the context of work or personal studies? Like, yeah, what about those other contexts?
It's the same. Yeah, with work as well. It was like once I'm a relatively quick learner. It was very new. It was new to the company. Everything's new. You're trying to find your footing. After 2 weeks of just being glued to the laptop, I figured out like how everything works in terms of like who to go to, who to talk to get these answers, how to solve these problems. But then what happened was, again, because it became easy, there wasn't as much stress. I started to then slowly decline in my performance
Mm,
until like it became an issue, and then I started to then stress myself out to going back up. But it's not as easy in the real world when you decline to then go back up,
mm,
especially when you're new. You come in, there's a lot more assistance, and then if you decline, like that becomes the new normal. That performance becomes the new normal,
mhm.
and then if you start to decline, it's a lot harder to go back up because now they've put more responsibilities onto you.
Yep.
And I still was performing like I was fine in terms of the work, wasn't concerned or anything about that. But in terms of my own performance and what I was capable of, I was just like wasn't performing as I could have been,
Mm.
and also eventually led to burnout because I felt like I wasn't getting what I was putting in out.
I see. I see. This is very useful. There's something that I do want to explore. I would actually love if you had like a recent example of this cycle occurring, because I think what we've done so far is we've been able to lay down like generally what happens, the abstractions of your experience so far, and some of the like overarching problems. But has there been something that's recently happened, either in the context of work or university, that like really drives this problem back home? It's like, yep, this is exactly what happened. This is the problem, like manifested in real time.
Yeah. So I can give you a couple. For example, I watched your video where you talked about like, with your uni, just look for the assignment straight away and then just try to attempt that and then go back. So I was like, okay, sweet. Um, I got the assignment, I started doing it, and then I started like it was like, whoa, I don't know any of this stuff.
Mm,
Had to download a virtual machine on a Mac, figure out the whole system, whatever.
mm,
And I was just getting stuff done, working, chopping down at it. Then, um, once I got everything and it started to look okay, and I have everything on documentation of what I'd done, and the assignment's like 80% done. I haven't touched it since. And then I kept telling myself, okay, I need to do it because the longer I leave it, I'm gonna forget it. But I just haven't touched it. And
mm,
then now I know when I go back to it, even though it's not due until the 15th of April, I'm now going to have to make up for the time that I put in is no longer as effective as it was before.
Mhm.
Same with machine learning, exact same thing. I almost finished the assignment, was working backwards and understanding the whole like the concepts. Managed to get through in just one day 2 weeks of content, like in just one sitting, and understood that relatively. But now, again, same thing, because it wasn't a urgent thing, and it's due next week Thursday. I just left it, started working on something else, and now when I come back to it, like right now, I'm lost. I don't know what the concepts that I grasp. I still have them roughly, but they're not as much in my head.
Yeah.
With my old job as well, got in there, exact same thing. So I was there for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, like started taking calls. It was like service desk at Morris Blackburn. Started taking calls, and then beyond that, started to help with networking issues because I just have an interest in that, and was picking up on things relatively fast. After a while, it stopped becoming as interesting, and it became easier. Problems were very similar and stuff. I stopped, I guess, taking as many notes, looking through where I keep all my solutions and things. And then when a problem came in where I didn't know what to do, I hadn't had the skills. Like I was a lot more stressed, and it took me. I had one problem that took me over an hour when it shouldn't have. If I had done the things I had done first, like after that first 2 weeks in the first month, I would have at least got to some type of movement a lot sooner. But because I had just been coasting and stopped using the skills that I had trained, because I was being lazy, but I think it was just there was a lack of challenge. I felt there was a lack of challenge.
Yeah.
Then I didn't have the skills at that. Well, I didn't know. Like I didn't know what to do at that point, and so then it wasted so much time. Even though I've dealt with similar problems in the past. And so that also was like, I think that was the scariest one, because that's a real world like work, just getting into the workforce. Where after I'd realized that, now I have to make sure I have the time to do like my work, but then I also have to get better at these skills, which is like problem solving on the spot, taking in the information from the person, writing down like everything so that if I can't solve it, I can pass it on to someone else. Moving it along as well, like in terms of, if this isn't working, try this. If this isn't working, try this. If this isn't working, try this. And just getting somewhere instead of just trying the same things over and over again and expecting a different result for some stupid reason. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very useful. There's an analogy that I want to share, because as you're mentioning that, there's like two branches that I want this conversation to move forward to. And ideally, for the remainder of our conversation together, we're going to explore both of these together, just because I do believe it's quite useful to go through both as opposed to just going through one.
Yeah.
The analogy that I want to share is, let's say, for example, you were a football player, like an up and coming football player, you're a striker, and you're new to the game, and there's many new teams that you're versing, and it's a new tournament, etc. And so there's new people, there's new teams, new faces that you haven't seen before. And so, of a football player, the way that I see it is that if you're new, based on what you're mentioning, and it's exciting, it's like, cool, let's go versus team. Let's go study their strategies. Let me go get familiar with the strikers' faces, the defenders' faces, the goalkeepers, like their strategies, their tactics, their formations. Initially, it's quite exciting. But then what happens over time, it's like, well, we can't really be bothered going to these football games anymore because they're getting boring. We can't be bothered doing training because it's like not that fun, etc. But the analogy, the reason I mentioned this is because in this football player situation, there's true problems that I see occur, and then I'll extrapolate this to learning. First, it's about actually getting onto the pitch. So there's a problem with a football player being in their room all day, kind of procrastinating, not making it their way to the pitch, not having a good diet, etc. They're not even playing. Like, that's a very big problem. But then there could be the other problem where it's like they are playing, but the technique that they're using, the strategies that they're implementing as they play football, like that needs work. So if we take this to the context of learning, for example, there's two things. Number one, people have a problem with even sitting down to learn to begin with. They can't even be bothered. They can't move themselves from potentially, procrastination or just relaxing or doing something else, anything but learning. So that's one problem that can occur. Another problem is like, no. They don't have a problem with sitting down to learn. There's no issue with procrastination whatsoever. It's more so the techniques that they're using whilst they learn. It's just not engaging enough. It's not stimulating enough. It's not interesting enough. And so therefore, when they sit down to learn, it's just passive. It feels boring. It doesn't really feel like it's leading to any benefit. Therefore, it inevitably ends up in like not doing the learning in itself. So the reason I want to explore these two pathways for you is because the solutions are different, but they're part of the same coin. So for example, what you've mentioned is two things. Number one, something that I do want to explore with you is like, cool, when things are interesting, that's good. But when things are no longer interesting, you're no longer sitting down to study or sitting down to learn. Is that an issue with your environment? Is that an issue with medication, ADHD? We'll definitely talk about that because that's a very real thing that we need to consider. But then the second thing is, if you do have time to sit down and study, how can you then use different learning strategies to make it so the things that are still not that fun, you try making them at least a little bit more enjoyable, at least a little bit more fun, and having some different reframes and strategies that you can use to like engage in that a bit deeper. So, we talk about learning enablers, which means getting yourself to learn in the first place, but then learning skills, which is like, cool, now that you're learning, what are some different strategies you can implement? So these are the two pathways. Before I move on, any thoughts, any questions before we start off with the pathways? Does that make sense? Or is there any like confusion in terms of like the distinction between the two?
No, there's like made complete sense.
Okay, cool. Let's start off with enablers because this part of the conversation is a lot quicker. It's a bit more important. And then we'll dive into the learning skills, which is like, we'll talk about specifically what are you doing sitting down? What are your expectations with learning? So the reason I need to start off with learning enablers is because it is a very real thing that gets in the way of people actually sitting down to study. And basically, when you have ADHD, it's like a 5x, 10x like difficulty. Like you're already on hard mode. Like, sorry to say, but like that's how your brain is wired, right? So we need to make sure that we're using strategies to mitigate that. But tell me more, because I know earlier towards the part of the call, you're like, it could be an ADHD thing. How are you trying to manage the ADHD right now? Like, are you on meds right now? Are there any specific strategies that you're using? Tell me more about that.
Yep. So I think the state I'm in right now is a lot more because Ramadan, I stopped taking my meds completely. And that took me for like that really hit me.
Yeah.
But now as I'm coming back up, with the enabling stuff, it's more of it's just been like diet, no carbs in the morning. I'm trying to minimize my caffeine intake. Exercise, high intensity exercise. If I don't exercise, I actually get headaches. So if I don't like get punched in the face at least like 3 times a week, I need high intensity, high stress, like Muay Thai, or even running. Like I'll go push myself really hard. That also helps me have less energy to then focus. It's like, so basically making sure I don't have enough energy. And then most recently, I think the thing that helped me the most was having a very busy schedule. So 1 month before I burnt out, I basically had a 4-month period where I was working full time, had another job, was starting like a charity organization, and then I was also just volunteering every now and then while also trying to learn my religion and that's about it. I think everything. And also just reading self-help books on the side as well. That was the most productive I had been because I was constantly doing things. And so I didn't have energy to like overthink and my mind to go crazy. And I would just, when it was time to sit down and do this, I would sit down and do this. When it was time to move on and sit down and do this, I would sit down and do this. And I was tired, so my brain wasn't running as fast. Now the only problem is I'm going into that state again, but I burnt out because I was in that state and I felt amazing. I wasn't taking the time for myself. I wasn't doing the things normal people have, like days for themselves and whatever they do. And so I was just go. Felt amazing. Started taking on more stuff. Like right now, I'm currently going for like took off. I'm taking a legal issue as well with the government, and I felt amazing because I was getting stuff done. And I'm sure if people have ADHD, that they know what it feels like, where it's like you're finally able to like use your brain and it's working and everything's going. You're able to just do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then burnt out, Ramadan came, meds came, and it's been on a decline. So I want to go back up, but in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Based on everything that you mentioned so far, like in terms of my experience, like working with neurodivergent students and people with ADHD, like the most important thing is just that keeping like a radar of the things that help you, the things that don't help you, and being quite sensitive to those factors as well. So what you've already done so far in terms of like exercise helps, having things on my plate helps, but not taking time for myself does not help. Like you're starting to identify the factors that work in your favor and the factors that don't work in your favor. And with ADHD, and because the fact that it's quite different for different people, because of different schedules and different priorities, it is always going to be that game of what we call self-regulation. Self-regulation just basically means do something, see how it goes. If it's bad, get rid of it. If it's good, keep it. And I know it's like it's easy, but like it's a constant game, because one thing that might work in this season might not work in, the next season, for example, or next few weeks, next few months. And so it's that constant game of making sure that you do that. Based on what you mentioned so far, it seems like you've got like a good understanding of like where you need to move towards. I do agree that like consistency and sustainability is like the most important, and you're slowly working on that, which is really good. The only things that I can kind of comment on here is that based on the learners that I worked with neurodivergence, obviously keeping up with meds is going to be like a very big life game changer for many people. Easily, in my experience, when I compare students who are on meds versus not on meds, the students on meds consistently outperform in terms of focus, in terms of getting things done. So obviously make sure that's something that you're consistently doing. And then exercise being one very important thing, that being an enabler of getting things done and making sure that you manage your energy. Obviously, there's more specific examples and schedules that you would use based on the type of ADHD that you have, which I don't have a lot of expertise in. But based on what you mentioned so far, I would say that you've got like a good understanding of how to manage that. And it seems like there'd be more value in discussing those learning skills, specifically what you're doing to sit down and learning. Any thoughts before we move on to that? Any questions, or like, yep, all good to go?
Understood most of it. Just curious, with the learners, how they use that. Did any of them particularly say exercise in the morning was the best, or the time hasn't been a thing?
So what I can tell you is that exercise is better than no exercise. This is something that has consistently been shown in my experience and in the research. In the research, something that's been demonstrated is resistance training is actually more potent than cardio. So this is the literature. Maybe different people have different preferences, but things like Muay Thai, things like gym, things like resistance training, muscle, weights, those were more potent in terms of more effective than cardio alone, for example. So a mix of the two were better. In certain subsets, I believe that resistance training was consistently better than cardio. So that's something that I noticed. In terms of time, I did notice that people did have a preference towards morning. So this was definitely something that I noticed in the students that I've spoken to. And the reason that's the case is usually because a lot of these people are students, so my data set is limited. There are people who are professionals who don't get time until after evening. Sometimes it's actually better for them after the evening because, like, for example, if they're working, exercise is actually a way to rejuvenate your energy. But doing exercise first thing in the morning is probably not the most strategic use of time because you've already slept. Assume that you slept well. You've already got energy. And so for them, they like having an exercise slot at 5 p.m., at 6 p.m. There's also other factors. They've got kids are at day school, daycare during that time. So there's many things that get in the way. But yes, TLDR, like exercise, resistance training in the morning has been like the trend so far for many learners.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So let's move on to the specific learning strategies in the remaining time that we have, because I do think this is where the biggest difference does happen, but it is also the longest journey because, working on integrating these learning skills into your system is what takes time. Let's talk more about how you are approaching your learning, like the specific strategies and things that you're doing to sit down and learn. Let's say that there was a new topic that you've learned. Like, what are the general steps you take in order to tackle that topic?
Yep. So I tend to like uh so the times basically I think back to I had one good teacher recently, Edward Small, and that was a time where I've got to fully apply myself to learning. And what I found was I try to figure out how to apply it to my real life. Just how can I see it in real life? So for this example, it was algorithms. Just talking about worst case scenario, and then that was like when you order Uber Eats and it tells you the time. The worst case scenario is the longest amount of time. So I try to like see how I can bring it in real life to correlate it.
Yeah.
So then that makes it like, okay, this is important because I can see it in real life. Then after that, I like to argue. Like not there's no other word to use it than argue. I like to like what I understand, what I know, what they've told me. I like to be like, okay, this is what I understand so far. Let me try debate this so that if I can't poke a hole through it, then they're able to like basically theirs is logical, mine isn't logical.
Yeah.
I'm able to forego what I know now because I've tried to prove this is false and I failed, and I can now accept this is my new truth. So it's just the quickest way I found that like it becomes that it's now how I think. It's not even a matter of this is what he taught me. It's this is mine now. This is my knowledge. So after that, I then try to apply it. So I usually don't take notes, which is bad, I know, but I just usually just start doing questions, start getting questions, and I just spam that, and try to change my way of thinking that approaches the question. Like algorithms is a very like logical way of thinking of this is your bounds, and that's it. Just do questions, think about it, and argue about it with the teacher.
This is good so far. Like I can see how this process that you've already highlighted, like makes it quite easy to approach something. Well, not easy, but like a lot more accessible to approach something that's difficult, like arguing it, doing questions, really enabling yourself there. What I want to know more about is like eventually what happens is, you know, a problem that you mentioned is like, cool, yeah, you're applying these questions, you're doing these debates, you're doing these arguments, whether that's with a professor or ChatGPT. But what's happening is there's a point where you're not interested anymore. Like it's just boring. Like what strategies are we using there? Or is it like we're not even using strategies at all? Or is it like there's nothing left to argue, so I don't even know what I argue on anymore, so therefore it's boring? Like what's happening there?
Okay. That is, I don't know. So the testimony to my life is like as soon as I see the finish line, I get bored. It's like I like it, I struggle. I do the hard part and build it up. It's just this is overall in every aspect of my life. I do the hard part. Once I see the finish line where I'm about to get the result, I'm like, okay, there's nothing. I'm not going to learn anything more now. This is just doing the grunt work. This is the just getting it done. And I just stop, and I don't have anything. So I have tried to put things in place. Plus, I think that is what I would love to get most is what to do then. What to do once I've got through that hard initial part. What can I do now to, I guess, finish it off and stay consistent?
I see. Yeah. So you're saying like there's grunt work and there's stuff that you need to finish off. Like what's stopping you from finishing that? Like, for example, what's stopping you from, let's say that there was like a few hours that you had on a Sunday and it's like, I could get it done then, but I'm not doing it. Like, what is that thing that's stopping you? It's like, why are you not getting it done in the first place?
It's this weird thing of I'm finally being productive. I want to use my time as efficiently as possible because it's not hard. I associate the difficulty with how important it is. And so I then think, okay, because it's easy, it's not important.
I see.
And then I just start to do other things that are hard and maybe might be important, but not as important as this. I did have one strategy at one point before I started working full time, which was I had a to-do list with a bunch of things. and I would just jump in between them
Uh-huh.
constantly.
Uh-huh.
And that helped me get through it a bit more, because if I got bored, I could switch to another task and then I
Yeah.
could come back.
Yeah.
But in terms of finishing, it's still the same issue of like, I know what to do now. Just doing it it's like I'm not going to learn anything by doing it.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. So there's two things here. Number one, like I would agree with you. It seems like your decision-making process and the way that you're prioritizing is is slightly inaccurate. So what's happening is, as you've mentioned, it's like we're judging the importance of it based on our perceived feeling of difficulty, as opposed to the importance being associated with the completion of the project or the deadline, for example. So that in itself was already going to get in the way of many things, because, for example, there could be something that is very easy to do. The deadline's there, but your brain is like, nah, it's not interesting, therefore I don't want to do it. So that's something that's happening. Another thing I see that's happening is, like you're saying, that there's this constant feeling of knowing what to do, but like we're not doing it in the first place. I personally do see these coming down to a form of procrastination, where we're procrastinating on the easy tasks using the difficult tasks. And the reason it doesn't seem like procrastination is because we're still doing things, right? It's like we're still getting movement done. Therefore, are we actually procrastinating? But the reality is we are procrastinating. It's just hard to think that, well, if we're not scrolling on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, are we really procrastinating? But the answer is yes, you are procrastinating. And it's useful to think about yourself as procrastinating in these situations. So yeah, any ideas that come to that? Because I feel like you've got some thoughts. I feel like you've got this train of thought.
You're on the money. You're like, I just that started smiling because I was like, you're on the money. Like, I don't know why, like it's it seems so obvious
Mm,
that you said it, but constantly it's just, I switched from all these dopaminergic procrastinations of TikTok and reels and YouTube and movies to now a more productive, quote unquote productive procrastination.
mm, mm.
So yeah, that's a big one. I never stopped procrastinating. It just looks different now.
It just looks different. And that's a very human thing. It's not to say that, this is like a problem unique to you. It's just that, like, again, the way that we are procrastinating now is in the form of like more exciting tasks related to work, more exciting tasks related to studies. I'm keen on thinking about a solution together. Like, now that we've kind of unraveled this being potentially like a form of procrastination disguised as like this productivity, like, what are some solutions that you feel like would work for you based on your personal experience? Do you think like it's like, yeah, now that I know it's procrastination, if I hit up the library on a Sunday and I got this boring task done, I know I could sit down and get it done, even though I don't feel interested in it? Or do you feel like, no, there needs to be a solution beyond that?
Um, I do like, in terms of calling myself out. Yes, I'm more likely to call myself out and be like, okay, now you're procrastinating, and I might be able to snap myself back in.
Mm,
But in terms of like the skills, in terms of time blocking, stopping my distractions, like hitting the library up is something that I've only recently tried. But
mm,
then once I do hit the library up, because I don't have my home set up and
yeah.
everything, it's also, I was also keen on like, how can I also best optimize once I'm sitting down? I've got this boring task. What are some skills I can do to optimize it, make sure I retain it, make sure I just don't just do the task, and like remember and be able to articulate what I did. Because another thing is, if it is boring, then even if I get through the task, I can't really explain what I did, because I was thinking of 50,000 things while I was also just doing the boring tasks, because I'm
Mhm.
not as engaged with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually something that I want to dive into, because something that you've been repeating throughout the conversation is like, you can't explain what you did. Like, tell me about that. Like, why is it important for you to explain what you did?
Because I feel like in general, but especially in the workforce, I
Mm,
need to be able to articulate to mostly typical people
okay.
what I've done, and
Mm,
like how I've gotten to a solution.
hmm.
And it also just teaching people also helps you learn so much quicker.
Yeah.
And I've just found that when I do explain things, to people, I tend to skip a lot of steps.
Uh-huh.
And then also when it comes to like certain areas, I just don't know. I've got the answer right. I've got the overarching. I mean, you could testify to this about the when I was talking about the temperaments. I
Mm.
had the overlaying thing
Yeah, yeah.
correct. When it came to like the nitty gritty stuff, didn't know.
Mm.
I didn't feel the specifics were as important as the main concept that is like the hardest part, in my opinion, to understand for
Mhm.
me at least.
Yeah.
And so then it's like I have an incomplete understanding of this. Like I may have a complete understanding of this and how to apply it to my life, but
Mm.
then if I go to explain it to someone else, I will give them a like I might lead them down the wrong path because I don't have a complete understanding and articulate in a way that allows them to do it for themselves. I've just got my own weird way of understanding it.
Yeah, yeah. So this is actually really good. Now, there's something that I want to mention. You not being able to explain something is not a problem. The problem is when it happens. What do I mean by that? So, for example, something that you mentioned is that obviously, when it comes to speaking to other people in your team, it's very important that you're able to articulate how you thought about the solution. But if you're not able to do that, it's not a problem that you're not able to do it. It's a problem when you're not able to do it. So, for example, if it's a meeting and this is your first time attempting to teach your solution, that's already a red flag. We should have been able to try to attempt that before the meeting actually started. So, how do we do that? I mean, the way that we could do that is there's a few strategies, but the overlying thing that we're using is what we call interleaving. So, a very simple way of explaining this to you is, for example, let's say that we've got like this cube. This is like a charger. And essentially what interleaving is in learning is that the way that we want to use the information, we actually want to use it in different ways. And if we use information in different ways, we can develop mastery from different angles. So for example, this might be one face where it's like, this is you actually doing that debate with ChatGPT. That's a very unique way of using information. You're poking holes, you're trying to contradict, and you're obviously doing this respectfully. You're trying to find gaps in their understanding. That's one way of using the information. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that that's not the only way we use information. Now we want to flip the cube, and now it's like, cool, let me explain it to a 10-year-old, right? Debating ChatGPT is very different. But if I had to sit down and pretend to make a YouTube video about these algorithms or this solution that I made, how can I now teach someone this solution? And now what you can see is that we actually bought this earlier. The fact that you're struggling is good, but we don't want that to happen during the real thing, like during a real meeting with like a real client. We want to do that before the actual session. So one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you based on what you've mentioned so far is embrace that challenge sooner and quicker. So if there's an opportunity for you to teach that information before a real meeting, do that and make that your battleground. Make that the place where it's like, oh, this is hard. Like, I don't know an analogy. Like, oh, this is tricky. And what that means is you then prepare yourself for the real thing. And so now you find yourself stumbling less. Like, you'll still struggle, of course. I mean, there's a difficulty associated with teaching. But if we can do that before the real thing, that exponentially increases your ability to perform and deliver in the real thing.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there?
No, that makes sense. Just prepare more.
Yeah, like specifically the way that you need to use the information, use it before the real thing. So if you've got a presentation that you need to do about the solution that you made, make a presentation for that solution before the actual real thing. On the weekend, for example, or even on the weekday, like before the next week comes about, and getting feedback on that earlier. That's a very useful way to make sure that you embrace that difficulty. But yeah, the reframe here is that you struggling with teaching is not a problem. It just means you got to teach more. And the more you teach, the more you get familiar with it.
Yep. That makes sense. And then I think the thing about teaching it to teaching it to a kid, I think also it would help in terms of like I did notice in the corporate space a lot of people don't really care like too much to understand it. So if you can just explain it to them simply and they know roughly what's going on, so they just feel like they know they have the know-how, then it is a lot easier than going into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
So, and then also just for me, it helps me keep it aligned to like breaking it down to its simplest form. Like I can already envision how that would be helpful for me. But then when it comes to the learning part of that, in terms of the gaps that I would have. Oh, wait, I think I'm having a realization here where if I learned something, once I've learned it, try to teach it, and then I would be able to understand the parts, the boring parts that I always miss,
Mhm.
that I have the gaps in, and then I could revisit and finish it. So like maybe something like I study it, do the concept, whatever, and then later down the line, I try to teach it to a YouTube video or a dummy or a friend or whatever. And
Yep.
then I would be able to find out, okay, this is what I need to revise. This is what I need to revise. This is what I need to go deeper on.
Yep.
And then it would make it more solidified.
Precisely. So what you've just created there is what we call an interleaving session. So it's a very fancy word for saying once you've done your initial study, let's say, for example, today is a Sunday, and today you study a little bit about like a new AI model that came out that might be relevant for your field, like, you know, like a data analysis AI. And what you might do, because today is Sunday and you've studied it, now it's like, cool. On Wednesday, so in 4 days' time, I'm going to do this teaching session. You might go into your calendar, you'll schedule it for like an hour or 90 minutes, and you'll go teach what you learned on Sunday. You'll try your best to recall it. You'll teach it to a 10-year-old. And that way, what you're doing is that, number one, you are recalling those concepts that you learned on Sunday. So you're reducing the amount of forgetting occurring because you're combating what we call the forgetting curve. So before you can forget, you remind yourself. And number two, you're using the information in a different way. Something that I like doing is I've got like a private YouTube channel for anything I'm studying. I will actually make a YouTube video for it. Like I'll hit up Loom or like some recording software. I'll make it and I'll just make it private. I'll upload it onto this YouTube channel. It's private. And that's like a learning log for me. Like this is everything that I've learned. This is everything that I've taught to a 10-year-old. And if I want to revisit it, I can just go back to the video and I can just listen to myself teaching it. And I might find gaps during that time. I might be reminded of things that I forgot. So that's like a flow that I personally use that's been quite useful.
Yep. I think I might steal that because it's funny. So I've been planning. Cause I'm going back into like a very busy period of my life, and just randomly, as I was planning my schedule for it, I decided to put like a period on a Sunday at the end of the day to like reset systems and reflect on performance. And that is essentially like reflecting on everything that worked and the self-regulation stuff, which you've just talked about.
Yeah.
But it's also a period for me to then also just after the week's done, try to teach myself everything I learned from that week. But do you think that would be too broad?
The first thing is like, I mean, that's already a very good start. And what we can then do is just iterate based on that. So if it's too broad, then well, that's cool. That's cool data. Like maybe that weekly is too broad. Therefore, we might need to have it twice a week, for example. There needs to be a midweek thing and an end of week thing. Maybe it works up quite well. Maybe, hey, it's fine that it's broad. I mean, this is better than not having any reflective process at all. So I think it's always comparing it to your current state and like, you know, ensuring and letting yourself have the opportunity to like continue refining it. But I already think that's a very good start for sure. Compared to the fact that many learners just have no self-regulation at all. Like there's just like, it's a very mindless, like, let me just get this done, move on. If I struggle, I struggle. If I don't, I don't. It is what it is.
Yeah. Awesome. And so then I think that interleaving session is definitely something I'm going to implement straight away, like as of next week Sunday. Can't wait for that. Now the other thing I guess is when I do sit down, like let's say I just want to like from what everything you've gathered, when I do sit down to learn, obviously you get your things set up. I have seen a couple of videos where like you get your things set up, and then once you've sat down, let's say for example you have machine learning, like or you have a one uni subject that you're doing. What is the actually regardless of uni, you have a concept that you want to learn. What is the way that you would recommend from a neurodivergent person how to attack that in terms of like, should I lean into the 4 hours that I could just do straight away, or should I still break it up even if I feel good mentally? Should I go broad and then like, or should I just go very specific? Like what neurodivergently, what should I do?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a big question because there's so many things, right? But I'll try my best to answer it. The biggest difference, like the only thing to remember is there's actually no difference in how there's very little difference as to how I would instruct a neurodivergent learner and a neurotypical learner. The only difference is that for a neurodivergent learner, they just have to often do more of it, and it does end up being a bit harder. So the strategy is the exact same. The principles are the exact same because the way that our brains work are very, very, very similar. It's just that for a neurodivergent learner, they will just need to do it for a longer period, or there's like a slight learning curve. So I see this to be the case across the board. So the advice that I'd give to you, we'll start off with the advice that I'd give every learner. And then after I've done that, I'll then talk about the differences that would occur for someone who is a neurodivergent learner. So for a very new topic, I've talked about this in other videos, but let's say, for example, there's a concept of machine learning that comes up. So you'll see that the very first thing that I like to do is I like to have the concept, but I don't actually like to read anything yet. I like to really just take a look into what I already know about the topic. And so what you might have seen in other videos that we have a technique, it's called pre-study. And essentially this is a 30-minute timer that I set. So I've got a kitchen timer here. I set a time for 30 minutes. And what I do is I just brain dump everything I already know about the topic. So I'm not even taking a look into Google. I'm not taking a look into any textbooks. I've just got like this plain piece of paper or like an iPad screen. I've got machine learning in front. And now these next 30 minutes, I just want to go wild with what I already know and some questions that are at the top of my mind. So because I've studied a little bit about machine learning, I might talk about machine learning, I might talk about AI, I might talk about LLMs, I might talk about like vector embeddings and different types of embeddings and different ways that they work, different technologies. And in that 30-minute period, I might be like, oh, well, I actually don't really know the definition of machine learning that well. I kind of know what it is, but I kind of don't know how to explain it to a 10-year-old. So what are some questions that I might have about machine learning? Well, the first question is, what's like a simple definition of it? How has the definition of machine learning evolved? How does this have implications on new technology coming out? Like, are there any applications that I use that integrate machine learning, for example? So that's what I'm doing in the first 30 minutes. I am really leveraging off of my prior knowledge and existing relationships that I have in my mind. And the reason I'm doing that is because of what we call the snowball effect of learning. So the snowball effect of learning essentially suggests that you want to make sure that a lot of your learning happens downhill. So if you think about like a small snowball that starts at the top of a hill, it goes down and that snowball slowly gets bigger. We don't want to be Sisyphus, and many people are Sisyphus during their learning. If you know Sisyphus, he's the meme, the guy pushing the boulder up the hill and he's just never stopping. Like, that's Sisyphus. We don't want Sisyphus to integrate. We don't want Sisyphus in our learning system. But a lot of people are doing that. The way that they're starting their learning, they're making it harder for themselves and making it more difficult to connect to existing information in their brains. And so the reason we start off with that 30-minute technique is so we can leverage off of the prior knowledge that we have, the existing schemas, and we can build on top of that. Now, let's say, for example, how does this advice now change for someone who is neurodivergent? The only advice that I have here is like, as a neurodivergent learner, you need to do this more. Like the urgency here is even more, because for someone who's neurodivergent, the snowball effect of learning is how your brain wants to learn. And the Sisyphus technique and that method, your brain does not want to do that at all. So you'll experience way more barriers and way more difficulty in like trying to learn anywhere else. So that's like the advice that I have here. Obviously, there's going to be behavioral things related to ADHD, for example, even getting yourself to sit down in the first place. That's very helpful. Some other small changes that I make is for like something that I instruct a lot of the neurodivergent learners to have is to actually use more manual methods of learning. So for example, if there is a textbook, if there's like a physical textbook version of the book that they're studying, I actually encourage them to get that, because sometimes them having access to electronics is actually very distracting, especially in that first 30 minutes. Or instead of using an iPad for their note taking, I recommend them to use paper like an A3 paper, some pencils, some paper, just easier things to integrate, because devices might actually be quite difficult to initiate on. Obviously, that's a very, very general advice, but that's like the way that I would teach someone like a new technique, or if I had to learn a new concepts, that's the very first strategy that I would use. And based on having neurodivergence, the advice would vary, because again, there's so many different kind of personalization things that you need to personalize, right? Does that help? Any thoughts there?
Yes. So the way with the correlation part, that's how I already like, but I never write it out. But whenever I'm learning something, I always try to think like, oh wait, that sounds like it's similar to this, and then I'll ask like, is this similar to this? But a lot of the time, like, I don't see the correlation between that. So
Yeah.
the brain dumping actually might be something that might actually be game changing, because it gets rid of all of that those thoughts as I am learning. Because I do
Yeah.
find when I am learning, I do that correlation thing, and then I go into a little tangent while the person's speaking.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give it a go and see if that helps.
Yeah, for sure.
But with the note taking, I do know that you talk about you guys talk about mirror boards and mind mapping a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I am conscious we've only got 5 minutes though,
Oh,
but
no, please go for it. Yeah.
I am like, sorry, actually go ahead, but I am also curious about the note taking part.
So something that you mentioned towards the earlier part of the call is like, you don't take notes and that could be a bad thing. It's a really long, very, very long conversation as to what note taking is. And unfortunately, the research is not very, very clear on it. But I can tell you based on our experience and based on the research that we have compiled, things that you should do. So TLDR, note taking is better than no note taking. So you should take notes in some sense. But the reason it's difficult is because you could get people, and this happens all the time, that don't take notes, but still outperform others that do take notes, right? That's why learning how to learn is so tricky, because like there's just so many things happening. Like you'll see, there's always that smart guy who's in the corner of the room who's just doing that, and then he just gets like 100 on his test, and it's just like aura. But it's like, okay, all right, what's going on? Like obviously there's different things happening in the brain, therefore there's deep processing. The way that one person thinks about things may be different, but the TLDR is something that can be quite practically useful for you. Is you definitely still want to have like a canvas where you're offloading information. So as you're doing those debates with your professors or with ChatGPT, it's still useful to have a place where you can write things down. There's some more specific recommendations I'd give to you. Number one, avoid type notes. Try using freehand notes. Freehand basically means pen and paper or stylus and iPad. The reason we recommend this is, again, the research is very, very vague, but the reason this helps is because when you are doing pen and paper or stylus and iPad, you are actually naturally forced to slow down. Like you cannot write as fast as your lecturer is, debating you, for example. Or if you are debating your lecturer, you cannot write everything but if you're typing, you definitely could. I know some people who are able to type as they speak, which is crazy, or they just use transcription, right? But the reason we want to avoid like typed notes in the first place is because, again, it's more passive and there's a increased probability that your brain is going to move into a passive state. But when we use a freehand note-taking method, we reduce the probability that our brain moves into a passive state. So here we're being more strategic. So that's what I can recommend to you. The last thing is, when should you actually write on notes? Because now this is an important question. Do we write down everything? Do we write down nothing? So the way that I'd encourage you to do this is by measuring your cognitive load. So I need to kind of define some terms for you. Basically, when you go to the gym, you exercise, your muscles feel some pain. And that pain is really good because your muscles are getting bigger, and it also shows that you're using your body. Slowly over time, your muscles grow. Same thing that happens to your brain. As you think and as you're engaging in effective learning, your brain actually needs to think harder. And so it's very likely when you're doing these debates with ChatGPT, with your professor and all these things, your brain is really feeling that energy, right? That difficulty, like that need to scratch that curiosity. So that's what you're doing right now. You're already engaging in that process. What I encourage you to do is question yourself every now and then, how hard does this feel right now on a scale of 1 to 3? 1 is like, this is quite easy, I think I can still keep going. 2 is like, ooh, this is feeling good, I don't feel like this is too easy, but I don't feel like this is too hard. 3 is like, ooh, this is where it's getting really challenging. And essentially, when you want to write down on paper is when you're at that 2.5-ish mark. So if you're doing a debate with ChatGPT and things are getting really difficult, this is where you want to ask yourself mentally, like, ooh, how am I feeling? How's my brain feeling? How hard is this on a scale of 1 to 3? Okay, 3, it's feeling quite challenging. Now what you want to do is you want to go to that piece of paper that you have in front of you and quickly write down and offload some of those thoughts. Once you offload that, you'll see that difficulty of 3 might come back down to a 2, because now you're just giving it the time to pause. This is like a rest between sets for your brain, and you're just offloading things that are on your mind onto this piece of paper, onto the stylus. And then once it's at a 2, it's like, oh, I think I've got everything down. Let me go back into my debate. Now this is quite useful, because now that piece of paper that you have in front of you, or the stylus or the iPad that you have in front of you, it acts as like a reference point for where everything is. And in case you need to make reference back to these things, now you've got a piece of paper as opposed to having nothing. So it's always quite strategic to have that in place. And that's like the general process that I recommend. Obviously, there's many like intricate things that comes into the note-taking process, but I'm sure we could do that in a future session that we have together, or a future call, etc. We could talk about that.
Yep. That sounds amazing. Definitely going to use that. And did you have any recommendations? Because I just got an iPad. I'm actually using it as my camera right now.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Any recommendations for? Because I know you guys use Miro a lot.
So I use my iPad way more than Miro. So you are in luck. I use an app called Concepts. I've just sent that to you. And I use the pro version. The pro version, I think, is a one-time payment of $7. I'm not sponsored. It's just really, really good. So that's why I use it. And that's definitely the best app, in my opinion, to use. Obviously, there's Freeform as well, which is like Apple's own one. It's not as great, in my opinion, but those two work very well. So Concepts Pro, and then you can get that on the App Store. And then there's also Freeform, which is Apple's own like note-taking software.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for all of this. Genuinely, I mean, I've also recently started doing the camera, the note taking with that thing.
Yeah.
But I never like thought it was. I'm just blown away, to be honest with you. Like there have been moments in my life, especially when I was studying myself, where you get this high cognitive load. You're trying to understand, why am I reacting in this way? What's going on? And I would feel this like intense like feeling in my brain, and I would just journal, and then I would feel like I would go back into the scenario, whatever. I'll come back and I would touch back on that point, and I was able to then better apply myself in that moment. But that was just that was just for me trying to study myself.
Yeah,
I didn't think it applied to real life, and I can't believe this is amazing. I'm so excited to try this.
No, cool. I'm very excited for you as well. Like what you're already doing, it's really cool, because like obviously there's things that you do like out of intuition, and there's things that you do out of convenience. But the tricky part, especially with learning how to learn, is like whether or not that's the right thing to do. Because like again, you've got people giving different advice, you've got people talking about different things, but I know it's very reassuring to like come in from a learning angle, or like an expertise angle, and being like, yeah, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. What you're doing very much works. We call it active cognitive load management. It's a very long term, but essentially it's just saying you're experiencing difficulty, you should do something about it. And yeah, one of the best things to do is like write things down. And then once it feels a bit more manageable, you move on. So that's definitely a really, really good thing. Some people in the moment, they teach. So as they're writing down, they might teach to a 10-year-old, because that actually helps alleviate them. The worst thing to do is to continue, because then what happens is that actually leads to burnout within the session. So that's what we call cognitive overload, where it's like there's too much load right now. And that's what leads to frustration. That's what leads to like a very real give up moment, because it's like, this is too hard. I can't do it. I'm going to give up. So that's something there. One last thing that I want to mention is like, I would say that your mindset around learning is already a lot better, a lot higher than the baseline of what many people are already at, because a lot of people, they associate difficulty with inability. So when they are feeling, oh, this is hard, that actually is a threat to their identity. They're like, oh, I can't be struggling with this. This is really bad. I'm not as smart as I thought. So what they do is they actually reduce the effectiveness of their learning techniques to make it feel easier. So now their brains are more passive, but because it feels easier, they feel better. So this is why they take pretty notes. They might do Notion notes. They might type verbatim, because those all feel easier, but there's a false sense of security associated with that ease. And so we don't actually want to fall into that trap. We want to embrace that difficulty, but obviously use strategies that allow us to embrace that difficulty in the first place, which is this process: journaling, active cognitive load management, etc.
Awesome. And Can I ask one question?
Let's do it.
So with my schedule, I basically have like an hour at nighttime of very light studying, and
Mm.
then Saturday, Sunday, that's where I do like I have 3 to 4 hour sessions of just deep studying,
Mm.
and that's where everything's gonna happen. Is just the cognitive like dump every so often whenever I feel that there's a lot going on in my head. Is just that going to then allow me to, I guess, soldier on to be at, you know, 80% for those sessions? Because obviously
Yeah.
your brain will run out at a certain point and you have to do easier work. But how any other strategies to make sure I can make the most use of those 8 to 12 hours?
Yeah, that's really good. So this is already going to be one thing. The what I'd actually like to offer you here is a mindset, like a reframe as to how you should be thinking about your progress. So what we've talked about today is just one step in what could be the right direction. So what we've just introduced is like a small, tiny change to your learning process. It's like now that, first of all, you're already experiencing cognitive load, but now all we're doing is when you experience that, just ask yourself, how hard is things? 1, 2, 3. So you're just measuring it. That's one small change. And the next small change is, okay, if you're getting into the habit of measuring that difficulty, just write stuff down when it feels a bit too hard. And the next small change might be, cool. Now that we're writing things down, how should we write things down? How should we represent our ideas? How should we connect them together? Are there any strategies that we could use here? But then now it's like, okay, cool. Now that we're representing it, is there like, are there certain structures that we can use? Are there more learning strategies that we can use? Can we connect it more? So the mindset and the general perspective that you should have towards, especially learning how to learn, is how can I make small changes that genuinely get me to the right direction? Because what I can assure you is that the strategy will help, but will it be like the last thing that you do? Definitely not. There's definitely going to be like more things that need to do over time and slowly improve on. And so the mindset is, cool, let me go try this out. Let me see how I can get this to work. And if it works, cool. If it doesn't, I reflect on why it doesn't work and I continue moving on. And so, the next conversation might be when you get into the habit of writing things down on paper, how can you now structure that in a certain way? How can you make it more memorable? How can you make
Yep.
it more meaningful? And those are different strategies. And so learning how to learn is a long journey.
From cradle to the grave.
This is a step into the right direction. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. It's okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Just stepping into it. Yeah, can't wait to get to it. I'll be sure to let you know how it goes as well.